We're into the semi-finals of the Skilling Open, and I'm going to look at one of the games in the All-American battle between Wesley So and Hikaru Nakamura. This game reaches a grand climax, so stick around. Well, Wesley had a bit of a crash in 2018 when he really didn't perform well in the Candidates tournament, but since then he's been rebuilding, and you can sense he's getting his confidence back. Recently, he was a very convincing winner in the US Championship. A rapid event. It was online, but nevertheless, very good score there. Came first. Hikaru did not perform well in that tournament at all. But of course, we know that Hikaru has a fearsome reputation when it comes to rapid play. So this was going to be an interesting battle. These are big rivals. So it's a gioco piano, the opening of the moment. And the game actually follows one that I looked at the other day. You might have seen the game between Anish Giri and Magnus Carlsen. It followed exactly these moves. And Magnus Carlsen played knight e7 in this position. But Hikaru played bishop b6. Now, he has played in exactly this way before. Previously, Hikaru had played knight e7 against Ding Liren and lost that game. So he played something different. Here, he played knight h7. So a new move in this position, although this kind of maneuver is fairly well known. Wesley just played h3. He's a very responsible player. You're not going to see him risk everything in the opening. Knight g5. So Hikaru carries out this maneuver. But frankly, I'm not totally convinced about this. If he reached an endgame, then it could be that this pawn on g5 has gained a bit of space. You can play g6 and king g7, maybe f5. But we're a long way from there. And for the moment, I would be concerned about this queen coming out to h5 in some positions. Okay, at the moment, that pawn can be defended, but still, I don't see that this is helping black to attack, but I can see ways in which white may be able to use that pawn on g5 to his advantage. Let's have a look. Anyway, Wesley pushes forward with d4. Good move. That's taken. Well, you can see there are two pieces defending that pawn, so we need to exchange first and recapture on d4. So white has a really nice center. Hikaru hits back with c5. d5 and bishop d7. So Wesley has a nice space advantage. I like the knight on g3. Potentially, looking at these squares. So how can black fight back? Well, anyway, if it were black's move, then a4 would be a good start, just to give that bishop a little bit of room and perhaps press on b2. But it's Wesley's move, and he played a4. And that's kind of, rather shuts in black's pieces. Rook e8. Well, how would you play here with white? We're at the start of the middle game, and, white has to choose a plan here. When I was looking at this earlier, I was thinking, let's go straight ahead on the king side. Queen h5. Play like this. Just crack things open a little bit here. And, if we had a bit of time, swing that rook across. Knight h5, rook g3. The bishop doesn't need to move from c1. Looks like white has a great attack there. Now, of course, it's not that simple. Black can certainly fight back here in various ways. You know, the queen can come over. You can perhaps break with c6, but still, I think that's dangerous. But Wesley is far more responsible. I would say one thing about playing like this, if the rook comes up, then you can see that there is more potential for tactics here because that rook will be a little bit loose. There you go, I've managed to split my rooks. There you go. Instead, yeah, as I said, Wesley is a very responsible player. He does the sensible thing. First of all, before he does anything, he's going to make sure that that bishop comes to this excellent post on c3. He looks down there and covers the b2 pawn. Just keeps those major pieces connected. Very sensible. c4. So Hikaru wants to give this bishop some freedom. And, well, yeah, he might be able to press on this pawn. Let's have a look. Queen f3. So the queen moves over to the king side. Good move. And that could support the knight coming into f5. Rook b8. Bishop c3. There we go. It is an excellent post for the bishop. Protecting that one weakness and cutting straight through to the king side. I mean, looking at this position, I think we can say that, well, White's opening has been a success here. Not sure about Black's position. Hikaru is definitely struggling here. But he's good at struggling. He is very good at rapid play. Let's see how he fared. So bishop c5. That bishop perhaps wants to come here to exchange off. And then Black might be able to get counterplay. Rook e2. f6. Well, that move is necessary to blunt the bishop. And here, if we take this, then actually Black is all right because the bishop will have to move sooner or later. And then this pawn can be taken. So knight f5 played. Good move. Now, if that's taken, I mean, this knight does look quite fearsome on f5. But if it's taken, well, queen takes is fine for White, but that's an interesting move. To put the rook on e6, and after the exchange, then that pawn is going to drop, or one of these moves is going to be good. So that knight certainly can't be taken for the moment, and that is uncomfortable for Black. Bishop b4. So wants to exchange off that bishop, and then there might be potential to get to the pawn on b2. Bishop d4. Well, the players just repeat moves here. Hikaru hasn't got anything better than to offer an exchange. And now Wesley, it's interesting, he comes back, he just repeats the position. He could exchange here. I mean, it looks pretty ugly to have these triple pawns, but actually this one is not so clear. Because, for example, after this, rook b4 guards that. There's potential to attack that pawn with queen e7. So, yeah, in theory looks really nice for White, but it actually, Black can cause a bit of trouble there. So that's why after this, Wesley just came back with the bishop. So they've repeated the position. And now Wesley varied. He played knight e3. Good move. Looking at the pawn here. And this is a difficult position for Black. Hikaru played bishop c8 to bring the bishop to this diagonal. He could have exchanged here and played queen c8. It's an interesting idea because if knight takes c4, then g4. Of course, White doesn't need to do that. At some moment, White is going to be able to take this pawn, but Black may have a bit of counterplay. I mean, that's one possibility. It's not nice for Black. White is better. In any case, Hikaru played bishop c8. Bishop d4. Okay, now he would probably exchange bishops if the bishop came back here. Bishop a6, guarding that pawn. But now the knight comes into f5 again. And that looks starting to look dangerous because, well, if black can't exchange off. So the position was repeated. Bishop c8. And the knight came back. Lots of shuffling going on, repeating the position again. I did check this. The position was only repeated twice, actually. Threefold repetition would result in a draw. In fact, I think with the software they're using, they don't need to count. I think it automatically declares a draw if the position is repeated 3 times. That's what I believe. I'm sure someone will correct me if that's wrong. Anyway, rook c1. So Wesley varies. Of course, he's better in this position. There's no reason he should go for a draw here. So just increasing the pressure a little bit. And of course, black could trade here. But white is obviously better. That pawn is a sitting duck. But that might have been the best. Hikaru played queen d7. Now that is a really risky move because now black is a long way off having that option to exchange that knight, and that is a strong piece. So let's see. Well, if rook takes c4, then bishop a6. So Wesley just shuffled the rook across instead. There's certainly no problem with the e-pawn. That's guarded by the queen. So he can afford to bring the rook across. And of course, if this pawn is taken, well, there's going to be pressure on this one as well. So it's looking good for white here. Now, what are black's options? Well, it's tough. You know, we could play this to secure the king side, but rook takes. I mean, you can see this is simply better for white. Pawn up and pressure on c7. If queen takes a4, well, unsurprisingly, when the queen goes so far offside, then white can crash through on the king side. Not difficult at all. King takes, and then the queen breaks through, supported by the bishop. Game over, basically. So Hikaru played bishop a6. So white piece is looking good here, and here is when Wesley took the opportunity just to break things open on the king side. A very logical move. You know, he's secured everything else in the position, and the time is right just to chip things open. Pawn takes pawn. Now, we don't need to play knight takes pawn. Queen g4. Great move. White threatens knight h6 check, and then white's queen will take black's queen. So king f8. And here Wesley broke through spectacularly. Bishop takes pawn. Queen takes. So white is a piece down, and it's actually but it's very, very difficult for black to defend this position. The queen and knight, as is so often the case, work so well together. So already we've got a threat to come down here. Actually, that would be mating 2. Queen h8, queen g7. So king g8. Now, the queen and knight, they're fantastic, and they're holding off black's pieces because of the knight's range. It's actually very difficult for the rook and indeed the queen to come across to defend successfully. But if white is actually going to force a win, then it's clear that these rooks, or one of the rooks, needs to come into play. If we can bring the rook to g3 or h3, it is game over. That's clear. But how do we get there? Well, Wesley took his time. He played rook e2. No drama. Just wants to play rook e3, and across we go. If queen h7, this did not happen, but then we can take here. And this is winning. The major pieces still don't get across. Knight h6 is a winning move. That would win the queen. Hikaru tried rook e5. Of course, he's desperate to eliminate that knight. That is the key piece in white's attack. Rook e3. Very simple. It's shuffling over, and after rook takes knight, rook h3. Good move. Threatening a check, and, well, it'll soon be devastation. Well, now Hikaru played rook g5. He could have tried queen g7, but actually this is hopeless. There's no decent defense to this. He can thrash on here, but, well, let me just show you one variation which is typical. After this, now for the moment, white, well, only has the queen against rook and two bishops, but actually black's king is so exposed. This is just a winning position. Queen g7 threatened, so black has to give up the piece. And actually this is very easy. g4. This pawn isn't going anywhere. The queen can cut back, and the idea is to put the pawn on g6 and deliver mate, and black is struggling here. Let's go back. Rook h3 just played. Rook g5, and now Wesley finished off like this. Check here, and rook h7. That was the final move of the game. If the king comes forward, let's just go to mate. Here we go. Here, check. Queen here, king back, rook h8. I'm even going to play the final move. Rook g8 and rook takes. Checkmate. Totally convincing win by Wesley So. I really think he played very maturely, very responsibly. You know, whereas if we come back right just out of the opening, you know, I wanted to go full tilt here. That was my first instinct, you know, to swing the rook up the board and just go for it. But his approach was absolutely sound and much better. He combined positional play with keeping an eye on the king side. So, you know, he ganged up on this pawn, but when the time came, he struck and he seized his moment here with bishop takes f6. Convincing victory. Excellent. This was game 2 of their 4-game set, and so he was 1.5 up, and actually Wesley didn't have any difficulties in games 3 and 4. He just kept things very much under control, and, well, Hikaru didn't manage to lay a punch on him, actually. So Wesley won that first set 2.5, 1.5. So that means that in set 2, Hikaru must win that 4-game set to take it to a tiebreak, but he's going to have to improve his play. Let's see later what happened. Thanks for watching.